The natural world is currently facing challenges like never before. We're in a climate and biodiversity crisis, which is why we need as many young people as possible to connect with nature and work to protect it. I'm Mya, a young birder, naturalist and early career conservationist. In this documentary, I'll be sharing the stories of 4 incredible young people who are all connecting with nature in their own ways, whilst breaking down barriers, combating stereotypes and engaging others along the way. They are the future of conservation, and I'm sure their stories will inspire and empower you. Let's go and meet them. My first destination was Knepp Wildland in West Sussex, the renowned Wildland estate. I was here to meet a friend of mine, Şeniz Mustafa, who was very familiar with the estate and its resident white storks. Şeniz is a bird researcher, campaigner and nature content creator, and I couldn't wait to hear her thoughts on a range of different topics. Oh, there they are, look! Is the clustering, I always thought it was courtship.
It's a little bit. It's sort of like their way of greeting each other. So if one of them comes onto the nest, they will clatter because they're greeting each other.
Right. Oh, so it's not just within pairs and it's within the group?
Yeah.
So what were your earliest memories of nature growing up?
I think there was always a lot of nature growing up. So like in Greater London, you have a lot of natural spaces, particularly like national parks, country parks and stuff. So nature was always like quite around. But I think in terms of interactions, or at least when I really properly connected with it, I think about maybe like the foxes. So when I was like, it might be like 17, 18, we lived in this masonette and we had these red foxes in the garden and they'd like sunbathe, like fully like that. Like they were so relaxed around us and you'd watch them have the kits and stuff.
Aww.
And that was the point where I was like, oh, I really like them.
You are obviously known as the White Stork Lady.
Oh, lady, she's graduated from Girl.
So would you be able to tell us a bit about your research on white storks? It's very interesting.
I mean, I could talk about it start to finish. I mean, it was very opportunistic of me. I found out about Knepp when I came back from my placement year, and I found out, okay, we only really have master's projects. So when it came around that time, I was like, give me your list of projects.
Yeah.
Give them here. And I saw they had a white stork one, and I'd become quite interested in birds. I'd done a study on common terns at Chichester Harbour, looking at their foraging, and this was like a foraging project with white storks. So the whole idea is, well, they were reintroduced. No one has ever done a formal study on what they're actually eating, so mine is the first to do that. And as they're reintroduced, it's important to understand what they're eating, to understand how they're impacting their local ecosystems, and whether or not the local habitats are giving them what they need, the correct sustenance, the correct prey. So it was based here at Knepp. I camped a lot in the summer, and it was all based on pellets, which are bird vomit. It's not poo, not as much of a distinction. So I was collecting those all summer, and then I had to do lots of lab work to dissect them. This is what got me really passionate about research, because every time I went in the lab I said, okay, this is what they eat. I'm an expert now. Do another pellet, go, why have you eaten that? Why have you eaten that?
Something new every day.
That's not right. What? And so we found that they were eating, beetles, small mammals. They were even eating like flies and stuff like that. But what's good is because it shows us that, number one, they're eating what they're meant to, what their Western European counterparts are. Granted, it's quite more of a pilot study because they're still supplementary fed. Sure. So there is still that element, but it's sort of a projection of what it might look like afterwards. But they're eating what they're meant to. We know that they're foraging grasses as they're meant to, and they're eating aquatic prey. So we got snails as well, that was another one. Aquatic beetles, which was so cool. So we know that they're doing that. So they're expressing everything that they should be. And so it's sort of that sigh of relief of like, okay, they're not eating anything in danger, we can all take a...
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about the youth panels and butterfly conservation.
And UK for Nature.
Yeah,
both of them,
all of them.
I think primarily with UK for Nature, who said that, number one, I mean, I think as a general rule, we want to make it so that there's a space for young people in the nature sector because that's where they belong. And I firmly agree that, and I think that's the case for every person. Yeah. My other goal is I'd love to celebrate youth excellence a lot more. I think that, you know, there's so many more people, you know, we're not just the few that you see online, we're the many. And I think there's a lot of people doing great things, which maybe it's less than others, but they're doing the best of what they have, and we should recognise that and lift them up using the platform that we do have. With UK for Nature, I've done a lot of accessibility and inclusivity. I think that's really important. I don't see a lot of people like myself, and I know there's a lot more other people who feel exactly the same way. And I think that nature needs to be for everyone in an intersectional way where we really think that mindset of, you know, are we being inclusive of people who are ethically minoritised, are neurodivergent, have lower income status, different genders, sexual orientations, these things, because nature is for everyone. And so I think the other big goal is just getting older generations and getting politicians and people in power to listen to us. Because after all, we're the next generation who's going to take over things. We need to learn from you, but also saying, you know, we know what you and past generations have done to the earth. We're the ones who are going to deal with the ramifications. So why won't you let us fix it? Because we've been just not part of most of anything. I don't know if that's because we're young and people don't believe in us, but we need the older people to trust us. You know, we have so much drive and so much passion. Why can't we work together to make things make a difference?
Social media is a great tool for creating a community of like-minded young naturalists. I travelled to RSBB Rainham Marshes to meet with Johnathon Miller-McCall, someone I'd known on Instagram for a while and seen doing great things. Johnathon is a fantastic science communicator and storyteller, and I was looking forward to finally meeting him in person.
Have you done a lot of like birding and wetland sites like this?
Yeah, here and there. The last time I properly did it was at London Wildlife Trust.
There's lots of birds out here, isn't there? Right, we've got
Loads of lapwings.
So that's your first lapwing? First lapwings?
Yes, I can't even count how many there are, but there's loads.
Quite a few.
Yeah, there are quite a few.
Oh, brilliant, lifer. How did you get into wildlife then? What was your sort of earliest memories of nature?
So I'd say I've always been in like a nature nerd from like a little kid. So my earliest memories would be catching insects. I used to catch them in like leftover takeaway containers,
Love
like
that.
Grasshoppers and stuff, and ladybirds. I was literally always outdoors. I wasn't really an indoors kid. A lot of my friends at the time were like playing games, and I couldn't really stay in one spot. So I thought, like, why don't I just stay outdoors like all the time?
But when was it that you sort of knew that that was something you wanted to get into in the future, like as a career or a general passion? When was it that that started to sort of develop?
Being around wildlife, I thought, why can't I have this as a job? But I didn't know how to get into it. I kind of had to put it to the side for a bit because of like school, A-levels, finding unis. Like it's these things can really stunt your passion. Basically, it was like, oh, I still want a job, but I want a job that pays well, so I want to go into accountancy. And I almost went into accountancy.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
I got offered to study that. Literally on the day I was meant to move in, I was like, why am I doing this?
Really?
Yeah. But then I ended up working in credit control for a year and a half, so didn't really escape the finance realm. And then, yeah, it got to like a year and a half later, and I was like, I can't do this. Like lockdown was around that time as well, so this was like 2020. I found a course in animal management and conservation at Nescott, and yeah, that was like the best decision I made, I'd say. Like if I hadn't gone into uni to study, personally I thought that really like helped develop my knowledge, get me outside, get me experience, and that actually inspired me to want to become an ecologist, basically. Yeah.
I think like in conservation and like that kind of world, I think a lot of young people think there's like one set route, and that's why it's so important to talk about that, like because you haven't got to know like when you're 10 years old, like that's exactly what you're going to do, and like it's going to be one set route, and it's all going to go smoothly. The majority of the time, realistically, it's going to be a bit more like that, isn't it? Like
there's ebbs and flows.
How have you found sort of entering the world of work?
It's been like a crazy year, like the way things have accelerated, but in the best way possible. While I was actually working at a dog daycare, one of my colleagues said, oh, there's a traineeship with London Wildlife Trust, why don't you check it out? And I like applied for it like twice because I wanted it that badly. So I did get the role. It was a 4-month contract where you do community engagement, comms, so social media. You also do practical conservation, so like habitat maintenance, and you learn a little bit about habitat management, which I think is really interesting. Also, I learned some stuff about like social media content creation, and yeah, like I basically identified that I was a pretty good communicator. Like I started posting stuff here and there, but it didn't really take off that much. Like I uploaded like a reel in collaboration with London Wildlife Trust. That was really good, but it wasn't me talking to the camera, and that it kind of waited until after I finished. I was back at the daycare. I was like, okay, I need to find the next thing now. I need to try and get like a full-time role. So still unsuccessful. And then I started making videos. Like it was random stuff. Like I think my first video was me talking about cuckoo spit.
So we're just walking through this park and we find these little patches of like bubbly things that look like spit. It looks like soap even.
And I was like, okay, maybe I can like start doing this here and there. And I made a few more videos, and that got me more opportunities. I started filming outside with Lyra as well. Yeah, like the whole content creation went into like events. I started doing more panels. I started talking a lot more about like my take on the sector, my experience. Also stuff about inclusivity, because I'm also a big advocate for that in the sector.
What do you think? I know we're talking a little bit about it, but for young people getting into conservation, it is pretty hard, isn't it? Like, what do you think sort of the main barriers are really for young people from different backgrounds trying to just get into the sector? What are the sort of main obstacles in the way?
I'd say firstly, underrepresentation. People of different backgrounds, they're not seeing people that look like them or have the same background as them in these spaces, and that can be a bit intimidating, I think. Imagine having all this passion, like this burning passion that you want to pursue this career in this sector, and then you don't really see anyone like you. You don't feel like you have anyone to like relate to, like a point of reference or like someone that you can look up to, and that could be a bit of a that can dampen your drive a little bit, and it's very hard. I had that, not to put like responsibility on myself about like inclusivity, but I want people to look at me like in the future and be like, I can do this because like Jonathan's doing it. Yeah, like
you already are a role model, I'm sure, to many people.
I'm trying. Like I try to tell people that you can like it takes a lot of perseverance, but I think once you find people that are like-minded, you can, it gives you faith, and that's all you need really, because the opportunities come.
Insects make up around half of all life on Earth, yet remain underappreciated. Many amazing species can be found right on your doorstep. The next person I went to meet was Josh Bowe, a passionate entomologist, university student and moth enthusiast.
I've not seen sort of a setup like this. Could you maybe go through what we've got here?
Yeah, so kind of the general design, this type of trap is a Skinner trap, which is essentially like a funnel with a light on it. But I've kind of put my own little twist on it, making it out of custom cut acrylic.
So people don't tend to think about moth trapping in the winter, but do you think it's so important that we
Definitely.
do it in the winter?
We do get a few species in the winter, not as many as like kind of height of summer. A lot of people don't even know that there's moths in winter. For example, we've got the December moth, which is lovely and fuzzy. It's really quite adorable, and people just don't tend to see those if they don't moth trap throughout the winter.
What is the sort of purpose of moth trapping in general then? I know it's obviously good fun. It's like going down for Christmas, opening presents, opening the moth trap and seeing what you've got. But what is sort of the general purpose of moth trapping?
Basically to see the diversity, number of moths in your surrounding area, to record kind of population trends over a long period of time.
Shall we have a little look then?
Yes, yeah, of course. So what I tend to do is just pick up each egg box and then flip it around to see if there's any moths.
So what's the sort of process? Obviously we go through the egg boxes, and then would you normally kind of write down what you've seen?
Yeah, so quite often I'll take a photo of each and every moth and then make a note in my notebook of what species it is, if I can do it, what sex it is as well, and then the number of individuals of that species. I upload that to iRecord or iNaturalist, and then from there it goes to big data frameworks such as NBN Atlas and GBIF, so it all gets freely used.
I mean, yeah, it's December, it's very cold at the moment,
Yeah.
so...
I know I'm cold, so I can only think how the moths feel.
Exactly. How are sort of moths are doing in general in the UK?
I think like a lot of insects and wildlife in general, really, there's been quite a few declines in terms of distribution and number of individuals seen just across the board, really.
Sure.
But some general species are doing quite well, which is good on one hand, but also we want all species to do well. So yeah, it's quite worrying times we live in.
How did you sort of get into nature then?
Well, I think as far as I can remember, for pretty much all my life, I've been interested in nature in some form. I think I attribute that a lot to my mum. She always bought me like the little like nature books, took me out for walks, asked what I could see.
So in your spare time, you're telling me a bit about your kind of collection,
Yeah.
which is very impressive, but would you be able to kind of explain a bit about how that kind of works?
So when you're collecting insects, it's really for a variety of different reasons. Having a collection allows people to come back to it at a later time to like confirm ID or check other characteristics and compare between their specimen and this specimen. In terms of ethical issues, people are quite right to be a bit confused, because when people think of conservation, they think of trying to save a species, and then quite rightly so, when we're collecting them, we're killing them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like contradictory almost. If you're only taking a few per site, per species, then that's not going to make a dent in a population overall. If a species is protected, then steer clear of it, because it's protected for a good reason. I have brought some specimens with me.
And that painting is amazing.
Thank you. Like Crimson Underwing. So yeah, I've just brought kind of like a highlight of British specimens. My favourite moth here, I say, is probably this six-spot burnet moth. So they're quite unique in terms of moths because they're day flying and they very closely resemble butterflies. And they also live quite closely in like separate colonies.
Okay.
So there's a lot of like variation and subspecies within those colonies.
I didn't know that. Is there anything we can be doing sort of as a sector, like in sort of entomology, to be sort of making it more accessible for young people, do you think? Or
I think just trying to encourage more young people and families out to like recording days, for example, or having them open a moth trap with you to like expose the young people not to just the idea of insects, but to expose them to like the physical thing, because a lot of people get into moths, for example, by seeing their first elephant hawk moth, like this bright pink, really fluffy type moth. And if people don't see that, then they don't know they exist, and then they won't care about them. So it's really getting that exposure out there.
Research is crucial for understanding ecosystems, developing effective conservation management and protecting species for years to come. For my last trip, I went to meet Hannah, a PhD student focusing on a rare and important habitat, chalk streams.
When you do your fishing days and you're surveying the fish, some of them will just have like little holes in them, and that's where a heron's gone in.
oh wow,
But the thing is, like, a lot of fish can survive that, so just keep going on with this like hole on the side
that's
of them.
amazing.
I know.
I did
and,
not
like,
know that.
And like think as well, like in the water, how much stuff you're like exposed to. They must have incredible immune systems
Oh
just
my
to like
God, yeah,
keep
all the
going.
bacteria and like sewage
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, exactly.
That's just flowing through. Like, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I know.
So, what were your sort of earliest memories of sort of nature?
My earliest memories of nature would be the apple tree we had in our back garden. And, you know, in September, all these apples would be growing and then ripe and ready. And these birds would come and, like, you know, peck at the apples. I must have been about 3 years old.
Oh wow, that is early.
I don't remember this specifically, but my parents told me about it. And I was looking out my parents' bedroom window at these birds, and I was like leaning all the way out because I was like wanted to be with the birds in the tree basically. So my dad had to like basically run into the room. He saw me there like dangling out, and he said he had to like basically rescue me.
Oh my God, wanted to be a bird.
I wanted to join the birds in the tree, I think.
When was your kind of, did your passion kind of develop then? Was it a bit later on, or was it like throughout your kind of childhood that you kind of had that connection to nature?
I think, yeah, for me it would be during my degree. So I did a degree in biology.
Okay.
very like broad, and it would have been in my first year. We did a field trip to a place in Wales called Oralton. That moment kind of joined together my love of like research and science and all of that with the outdoors, and I kind of realised that it was something you could do.
So when did you kind of decide that you wanted to go into research sort of longer than just doing an undergraduate degree then?
Yeah, so that would have come in my master's. The degree I did was originally supposed to be a 3-year degree, so a Bachelor of Science.
Yeah.
And as second year went into lockdown, the academics who like ran the course, they were really keen for us to have experience, doing fieldwork or lab work. So that's when the course transitioned from 3 years to 4 years with an integrated master's. And once I finished that, I think I just realised I wasn't like done with research. Like I had so many more questions, like there was so much like curiosity there. And that's kind of when I started looking into doing PhDs.
So what PhD did you do in the end then, or what are you doing?
Yeah, so for my PhD, I am monitoring a river restoration project, looking at chalk streams, and I am looking at the response of fish and invertebrates.
Love it.
So that kind of ecological aspect.
Why did you kind of choose like the research path within conservation then, rather than doing practical conservation or something like that? Why was it in particular that research particularly sort of stood out to you?
I like the kind of the freedom that research gives you. I've been quite lucky that I get to like go away, do my own reading, and come back with these questions, and actually be able to go out and answer those questions. I think with the kind of research I do, I get to do a lot of field work. So I do get to do that kind of boots on the ground work, even if it's not necessarily the conservation.
Do you think there's any kind of barriers for young people getting into research within sort of the conservation space?
People talk a lot about imposter syndrome, not just for academia, but like for anyone who's doing early career stuff, and the idea of feeling like you're a fraud. And like within the conservation spheres, I think what I found and other people who do similar things have found is if you start a PhD, you're not an expert in your field in any means. You're there as like an apprentice scientist almost, like you're there to train. But there will be people who think because you're doing a PhD, you are kind of like an expert. Anything I say feels like it has to come with so many like, caveats and all these things, because like you don't go around with your head full of all this knowledge. You just know where to find it, Sure, yeah. It's that kind of like the synthesis, which is really important, I think, as a researcher, rather than being super knowledgeable.
What advice would you give to kind of future academics?
I think there's a misconception that going into academia means you need to be, top of your year. You need to understand everything, you need to be very good at memorising stuff, have really good exam results. It's not really about that. It's more about having that kind of curiosity and drive. Like research is a bit of a slog. It can be incredibly boring at times, but I'd say that good research is boring research. If you do have this love of nature, you want to understand more about how it works, and you can kind of see maybe some of these gaps emerging in research. Or you just have questions and you feel like they've not been satisfactorily answered in the pop science books and your podcasts and maybe in these papers you've read, then maybe a PhD is a good choice for you.
Developing an interest in nature and conservation can often feel quite daunting. The sector is still behind when it comes to representation and being accessible to all. However, I want to reassure you that there are tons of young people all around the world with enthusiasm, passion and dedication when it comes to protecting the natural world for generations to come, as we've seen today. There are now more opportunities than ever to get involved with wildlife organisations, and social media is a great tool for finding your community. We are the next generation of conservation.